Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Happy Death Day. I actually really enjoy sitting down with a conceptual horror movie and just enjoying it and kicking back and not thinking about my troubles in the same way that people probably enjoy cheap beer, in that it does exactly what you think it's going to do, and Happy Death Day definitely plays in that. When that comes to horror movies, when you're talking about that, you're talking about like people who like horror movies. You know, it's kind of like who likes cheap beer, people who want to get drunk. And so most of the time when I see movies like that, people would go, haha, you saw that one. And it's not for your average consumer who doesn't see a lot of horror movies. Happy Death Day is like if you took kind of a conceptual, kind of cheaper, cheap beer horror movie and made it for everybody. That's not to say that's necessarily a good thing. It's not necessarily something I think that most horror fans would entirely love, but it's certainly something that could like be, you know, someone's first horror movie. And Happy Death Day works really well in that, and I kind of like that about it. It's kind of interesting in the year where we have multiplex horror kind of expanding and getting a lot better and being bigger hits than it really ever has before, and having multiplex horror films that are actually about something and about ideas and such. And multiplex horror, I think, gets usually a lot of shit talked about it because it's never, the more creative directors don't get to go there. They're usually stuck on VOD or more of the indie horror stuff. And Happy Death Day is actually really good at being multiplex horror, like abnormally good at being multiplex horror. It's actually kind of surprising. It's not the kind of thing you see a lot from a director who seems actually like got the kind of film they're making. They got that this is probably like a slumber party horror movie, you know, for people to go, oh, but I got Happy Death Day, and they'll be like, oh, I don't know, that might be too scary for me. This film's not really scary. It's more about its concept than anything. It's kind of like Groundhog's Day, I guess, meets a slasher film, which is surprising they didn't make this before, since they've made so many different variations on the slasher film. To be honest, maybe they have. I know there's like other horror versions of this kind of a story, although I can never name the one that people have told me about, and they've told me about it twice today and I keep forgetting it. But there is another one that's not Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat or whatever the fuck. I think this movie has fun with the kind of Groundhog Day concept. I've heard of films that introduce a concept and that concept becomes very influential. Lots of people use it and things like that. But the interesting thing about the Groundhog Day concept is that when you explain to anyone, they can't say, okay, so someone wakes up every day and like they keep repeating the same day. You basically go like, so it's like Groundhog Day, and everyone goes, oh, right. I just find that sort of interesting, the shorthand. Like you wouldn't go, well, you've seen Double Indemnity, right? So it's like that. It seems like anything that uses this concept, people go, oh, it's like Groundhog Day. I like the concept of this and the story of it. This character, Tree Gelbin, played by Jessica Roth, and Tree sounds like a weird name. It's the kind of name that film critics comment on, but while you're watching the movie, you'll probably not really think about what the fuck the girl's name is. And she gets killed, keeps re-waking up and reliving the same day, and keeps dying at the end of the day and waking up in a dorm room of this guy, Carter, who she supposedly hooked up with the night before, and she has to keep living the same day until she can figure out who killed her so she can move on and live another day, which I believe the next day is a Tuesday. Oh, that sucks. She has to keep living on Monday? That just hit me. That sucks. Man, this is like Garfield's worst nightmare. Damn, that sucks. Of all days. I think that would be the day I would pick least. Wow, how come they didn't exploit that more? How come nobody said, and I'm stuck in a Monday, lasagna. I'm really gonna compare this more to Edge of Tomorrow and Groundhog Day. I know there are other versions of it. I'm not as familiar with them as those two movies, so I'm just gonna use this a lot. But I think one of the more interesting things about Groundhog Day and Edge of Tomorrow is it keeps, or Live, Die, Repeat or whatever, is it keeps repeating and repeating and stuff, and you never feel like you know how many times it repeats, basically. You're kind of led to believe that there's times that you are not seeing that days have repeated, and you kind of accept that in both of those films. In Happy Death Day, they pretty much tell you at a certain point. I heard her say in the film 16, which is kind of goes into this kind of film. It's very very literal. It's the kind of person who has everything add up because that's the way it makes sense to them. It's kind of like he creatively used this film that kind of has so many rules in it that it kind of shows a lack of imagination, but he kind of creatively shows that he has a lack of imagination by using this concept so straightforward and strictly. And they bring up things that don't really come back, like her body's going through trauma each time she's killed and so forth, which doesn't really come back. Things like that you're kind of like, I mean, where were you going with this? And some of them they kind of bring up and then let go because naturally she's moved on to a different idea to stop the killer, which naturally works and so forth. It did feel like kind of like a kid's novel that you get at the Scholastic Book Fair that is like tightly constructed and everything makes sense and it kind of coddles you as it goes through it. But I thought this film does that very well, actually. There's something to be said about a film that just is what it is and does what it does and gets out and leaves, and Happy Death Day definitely does that. This is directed by Christopher Landon, who's an architect of the Paranormal Activity franchise, pretty much writing every one that wasn't the first one, and is also Michael Landon's son, so that's something. This was actually written by an X-Men writer, Scott Lobdell, whose comics I've definitely read. This doesn't really feel like any of them, and I'm wondering, because this had stayed around in development for a long time. Megan Fox was apparently announced to star in it in July of 2009, and it was originally going to be called Half to Death, so I don't know how much involvement Scott Lobdell had in this, but he's at least credited. So, but it almost plays like, I hear people say it's almost pretty much a comedy, it's not a horror movie, and it does feel a little more fun and comedic in certain ways. I wouldn't say it's a comedy, I wouldn't say it's a horror movie, and it's not like one of those who's making its own interesting thing. It just feels like a very digestible horror movie, and it's pretty much as digestible as it is disposable, in that it just kind of comes in, does what it needs to do, and leaves. It is like cheap beer in that way. You'll probably indulge in it and have a good time while it's going on, but later you're probably not as into it, and you know kind of the junkiness that it is. But this is made by people who, you know, would be cheap beer connoisseurs almost. They're people who like a good lark of a film, and Happy Death Day plays on it very well. It's actually very well cast. The main girl in it, Jessica Roth, I think is really good. I thought she was very charismatic. She really sells this movie. I think this film, she's really the glue that holds this film together. I'm curious to see her in other stuff. I don't know if this is maybe a showy of a role because there's so much exposition and things like that. It's kind of like a star-making role to a certain regard. If she was in another thing, I'd be like, oh yeah, Happy Death Day. She was really good in that. She almost has to sell the concept and the tone of this film, and she does it very well. I also like Gisriel, I think, does a very good job as Carter. The main leads in it are really good at, it might feel like kind of a college, because this takes place in a college, you know, kind of like teen drama type acting, but I think they know how to use that. It's like kind of like everyone was very self-aware of what they were doing, but just went right into it. It's not winking at the camera as much as people might like to pretend it is. It just is doing what they're doing, and they're doing a very good job at it. It doesn't exceed the genre or the concept or anything like that. It just is that, and that's what I wanted from Happy Death Day. And it's just like, Happy Death Day, take me away, take my troubles away. I just want to see this girl get stabbed a bunch of times. Please do that for me, and we will be cool. And Happy Death Day, I guess, sort of did. I don't think she just gets stabbed. She gets stabbed a lot. It's like more than twice, maybe. I would not recommend this to horror fans. I think if you're a horror fan and you see that I like this, you'll probably go, wow, that is fucking bullshit, this movie. But this is kind of like, you know, my first horror movie kind of a film. It gets you into it, uses genre tropes in ways that anyone, especially people who haven't really or know anything about the genre, can use in that. I think Christopher Landon really shows he's a director that wants to have fun. He almost gives very little hints of like more horror directors that like to put, you know, some more humor and kitsch into his things, or at least through the fun that he's having throughout this. Very slightly reminded me of the fun of James Whale, not to the same effect at all, but in saying things like, hey, this isn't as good as Groundhog Day or Edge of Tomorrow or something, is sort of an argument not worth having. Certainly I never went into Happy Death Day expecting it to be anywhere near what Groundhog Day is, and I don't think this film is even trying to. It's just trying to be a fun, enjoyable little dumb, coasting you to the weekend kind kind of a movie. It's fun, it's silly, I generally like it. My only real complaint is I actually really like the 50 Cent song Into Club, and I wanted to hear that a million times, and instead they have a different birthday song as a ringtone, and I'm not accepting that personally. I know people keep saying this was cut down for PG-13. I can't wait them to release the unrated cut or something. I could give a fuck about that. But if someone could just literally, it's just a soundtrack thing, I would see this again if Into Club was in it. I just like, because that was in the trailers, and I love that. I think it was funny. Similar to the I Got You Babe thing that was in Groundhog Day. Obviously they do have the same song, so I guess it's sort of like I Got You Babe, but I think it works better when you have a famous song, particularly one from the past that would work well for someone existing in 2017, much like how Bill Murray used a song from the past with I Got You Babe, and it worked very well. Clearly these people really like Groundhog Day. I think they think about the humor in it and don't think about the ideas in it, but like whatever to a certain regard. Sure, this is an empty, kind of silly conceptual horror movie, but it knows what it's doing. Happy Death Day is the perfect mix of horror kind of concept and fun. That's the kind of thing you just want, an enjoyable, silly horror movie. Happy Death Day is ready to give that to you, especially if you're someone who's not entirely in love with this genre. If you came to see this, you go, oh, this is cool, and the lead's good, and it's like, I had a good time. This is probably like such a down the line kind of good mainstream Hollywood type of movie. They even had a Mystery Science Theater the movie poster in the background, which is clearly not something that appeals to me directly. Although they had things like They Live, like typical dorm room stuff, but I was like, Mystery Science Theater 3000 the movie, I like that you put that reference in there, but there's no fucking way a college kid was putting that in his dorm room in 2017. Happy Death Day is exactly what you want it to be. It's a silly, enjoyable, fun, kind of cheap beer thing. And when you're having a good time on a Friday night, all you're really thinking about is the fun that you're having. The fun of Happy Death Day is certainly where it succeeds. Certainly it tries to do more dramatic stuff and things like that, and I guess I've read that lets people down, but to me that was like such a trapping of the genre. It's like, yeah, I guess you had to do that, I just accept it, whatever. I'm kind of just giving this film a break, but this film kind of gives the audience a break in itself, and that's just a fun thing to just sit down and watch. This is the kind of thing you love Hollywood for, is just kind of like kicking back and enjoying kind of a silly, dumb conceptual horror movie. And I think Happy Death Day is what it is, and is there to just get you drunk and make you distracted and give you the kind of dull opiate of the masses that you exactly want from something like this, and I was happy to receive it. So if you've seen Happy Death Day and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Happy Death Day.